Okay, yeah. So, uh, Christy, what comes to mind when I say the word uh setup, right? What the hell? Why am I in Steam?
Establishing your case.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, good job, both of you guys. So, the idea of setup is basically just the foundation of your case, right? So, in other words, you're just setting your case up basically. That's why we call it set up, because we set up the case, right? So, I think a very good equivalent for this, I used this for like the juniors earlier since it's easier for them to understand, is pendahuluan karangan. It's the same idea that in your pendahuluan, right, you want to mention the tema, right? So like kesehatan, patriotism, whatever, blah 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 blah, right? So in this sense, the tema is basically just the issue that you guys want to discuss, right? And then on the other hand, your tugasan is like the burden or the stance that you have to prove, right? So your kehendak soalan is basically just like the motion lah, what the motion wants you to prove, what burden does the motion give you, right? We'll talk more about that later. What exactly do these things look like? But then why exactly? Before we start, why exactly is setup important? Important. It's two things. Firstly, it's just not two things. Sorry, this is just one thing. It's mainly because actually, two things. Firstly, it's the fact that without the base, your case falls apart. So imagine a metaphor where you have like a cake, right? You need your flour, and you need your eggs, you need your butter, you need your water, right? Imagine your arguments are like what? I don't know, the eggs, the butter, the water, all the very important things, right? That if you do not have that, the cake is just gonna be flour. And then your rebuttals are like the cherry on the top. Your setup is basically like the flour. It is the basis for your case, but it shouldn't be the most important thing because you do not want a dry ass cake that like it's just like powdery. The point of setup is just that it's very minimal, but and it's very concise, but it's effective and it lays down the foundation for the rest of your case, right? Second thing about setup is that it creates clarity in the debate, right? Because the largest thing in setup is, later we'll talk about this, is characterization. The largest thing in setup, that is characterization, is about creating clarity in the debate, in the sense that you characterize certain traits, or in other words you define certain traits, so in order to ensure that it's very clear to the judge what exactly you are talking about. Okay, any questions before I move on? Nada? Okay.
Nope.
All right, great. So what's in setup, right? I did forget to include one more extra thing under here, but it's because like it's over here. Nah, this one. But I forgot to put it under like a fifth point or whatever. Okay, so basically what we're going to run down today is firstly on characterization, secondly on mechanization, thirdly on counterfactual, and fourth on burden of proof. So the way I'm going to talk about this is that I'm going to actually just talk about characterization as the main point of setup, because when actually setup generally is just like kind of a vague word about what different people have different ideas of what setup is considered. In fact, I know so many debaters that for some reason, I think in because they are debating circuits in like different countries, they instead of calling it setup, they call it stance. But then the difference in Malaysia, in a lot of Malaysian debating circuits, stance is considered like equivalent to your burden of proof. It's just written in a different way. So it's really, really up to different countries and different competitions and different formats and different people and whatnot, because of the fact that setup is so vague. But there is the consensus that generally your setup is about laying a foundation for your case. And the easiest way for me to teach this to you is that the main point of in setup, the main stuff that you need to do in setup is characterization, and under characterization we have extra sort of like tools or like concepts. That is one, mechanizations, or mechanism. And then when we do mechanisms, when we explain our mechanism, we call it mechanization. And you usually do this in this house wood motions, or in other words we also call those actor motions. And we'll talk about why they're called actor motions later. And secondly, counterfactual is also a form of characterization, right? In the sense that you do it mainly in value judgment motions. So for example, in motions that have this house believes that, this house supports, or this house opposes, right? And finally, we'll be talking about burden of proof. Burden of proof is not very important though, so I'll go over that in like 1 or 2 minutes. Now, what 1 in 2 minutes, as in like that's the length I'm going to be talking about that. So, right, um, I don't, yeah, don't no need to ask any questions about it because we already, it's kind of simple. So before we move into how to, actually no, when we now we're moving into how to characterize, um, I think the best way to explain what exactly characterization, where is it? Oh yeah, oh my god, I skipped a slide. Okay, the best way to explain what characterization is saying that it's perwatakan, because of the fact that, character watak. So characterization obviously means perwatakan lah. So in the same way that in your komsas you do perwatakan for like Razali and Munir when you in Form 1, right? Or like in this year you're doing like what? Di Sabalet di Nara. God, I hate that. I never actually read it. Um, Sorry, Chico Sylvia. Um, what's the character, like that one girl who like has an overprotective brother, or like that one, like her father who like wants to like use her for like lab experiments. You can talk like characterization in this sense is just giving context behind certain concepts in concepts or phrases in the debate, right? So for example, when I want to characterize like that, like Razali from Sajamba Bhakti, for example, I'm gonna tell you Razali has like the like these interests, or these incentives to, like he has these incentives to do certain things, or like he has this certain personality, for example, or has this certain sort of life with his certain friends and whatnot, right? So that's an example of characterization lah, that you just want to characterize or like explain and elaborate about a certain phrase, right? Now, a literal definition for characterization then is like what Khalil mentioned earlier, is that it's framing, right? Framing is a bit confusing for a lot of new debaters. Why? It's because framing literally just means analysis. Now here's the thing. I'm gonna slow down because this is a bit easy for people to misunderstand. Framing is analysis, but framing can be found in both your arguments and characterization. What do I mean by this? Okay, you look at your characterization. Basically, what you're doing is framing the debate. It's the idea that you frame a certain point, like for example, you're putting out a certain context, or you're painting a certain picture, right? That means that you're framing, right? And like just think of the word like frame, that you not like put frame things in a certain way. Like the way you frame a picture is the way that you're trying to paint a picture. So you frame certain points of the debate in your characterization. Later on in your arguments, you also do framing, and then afterwards you do your impacts and weighing and whatnot in your arguments. Maisha should have talked about this the last time. So yeah. Um in your framing of your arguments then, that is just framing for your argument, not framing for the debate, right? So it is very special type of framing in your arguments that is dedicated to proving your argument right? Because of the fact that at the end of the day, framing is just analysis. When you frame the debate for me in your characterization, what you're basically just doing is analyzing the debate. So, do you guys understand that? To like, is that confusing,
Yes.
Christy?
Yes.
Okay, great. Both of you guys understand. Right. So now let's go into a more in-depth explanation of characterization then. So characterization, I always say this, is about giving a backstory to a certain idea, right? Because whenever you start an argument with someone, for example, maybe, for example, you want to spread a rumor. Thanks to Maisha for this analogy. You want to spread a rumor about someone. You're like, oh my god, I actually, this is a real rumor I heard recently. I maybe shouldn't mention names or whatever, but there was this one guy who got caught having sex with this one girl in like kingsport, in like this one badminton court, and then like something in Lutong or something. Um, okay, in this case, before you when my friend was telling me about this, before they tell me about this, kan, I'm very confused. I'm like, okay, they just mentioned the guy's name, like, oh, the guy actually came back, the guy who had sex with another girl. I'm like, wait, what? Tell me the situation. So then they basically preface the entire situation before telling me the actual point that they're trying to make, right? That, oh, the guy who slept with another girl came back to school. He stopped being suspended, right? So in this case, all that like uh drama that she told me beforehand, like the all the backstory, is basically your characterization. It's like you're painting a picture behind a certain concept or phrase that isn't very clear in the debate. Because she calls him the kingsport guy, and I have no idea who the kingsport guy is, right? So you need to explain to the judge, or well, no, don't explain to the judge who the kingsport guy is, but explain to the judge what exactly a certain phrase that is vague is, right? But another thing that you need to consider under this point, when you're painting a picture about a certain phrase or concept, is that you do not want to just provide a rigid definition. Because rigid definitions are things that everybody knows already. If I ask you what is smoking, Khalil, what is your answer? Like, just as a rigid definition.
Lighting up a cigarette and puffing it.
Exactly. The problem with that is that the judge already knows that. You already know that, I already know that, and there's no point to mentioning it because everybody knows that and it's not adding any substance to your case. Tada, like, there's no point lah. Tada fungsi untuk like add it into your case kan. So, when you provide characterization, or when we call, some people call it defining terms in the debate, you're not providing what we call dictionary definitions, in the sense that you're not telling people that, oh, I smoke is that I take a cigarette and then I light it and then I inhale and then I take out the cigarette out of my mouth and then I exhale, right? Everybody knows that. The act of smoking, you don't really need to explain that unless you're telling me the smoking include vaping, for example. The smoking include like what is considered under smoking, right? Although that one is a bit not relevant to the debate because it's not very important to define, right? Another later we'll give more example of what can be more relevant to design uh what is it, characterized later on. But it's the idea that when you want to define something, do not use dictionary definitions. You need to say things that are like not clear, right? On whether or not smoking includes vaping, for example. That's an example of how smoking in a motion, maybe like this house will ban smoking, that in that sense, smoking is not a very clear definition in that sense, right? So you're just providing clarity through your characterization. Secondly, then, your characterization can also be used to provide context to the situation that we are talking about in our debate, right? So this leads me on to the second slide, right? It's that when we say it providing context to the situation we are talking about in our debate, we're usually talking about a certain issue in the debate, right? In a lot of debates, this ends up being the issue in the status quo. Christy, can you tell me what status quo means? If you know.
Is it like the current state?
Yes. Yes. Amazing. Okay, great. You remember. Some people don't. Status quo basically just means nowadays. I'm pretty sure it's Latin because you will see this very common. Status quo, everybody uses it. You're expected to know it as a debater. I don't know why. We just love fancy. No, actually I know why. It's because we're debaters. Um, Status in this sense, uh, when I say that you want to provide context to the situation we are talking about, I mean specifically provide context to the status quo, right? So what does this look like, for example? There's two questions that are very common in this sense. Firstly, what does the current world look like? So for example, when I was explaining to the juniors earlier, I used the example of the motion, this house regrets the popularization of virtual learning. This house regrets the popularization of virtual learning. In the sense, how can you answer what does the current world look like in the sense that about virtual learning and regarding this motion, what does the status quo look like? Khalil, give it a try if you want, if you can think of anything.
Using AI to learn.
Okay, using AI to learn. Yes, Christy. Any other ideas? Okay, it's fine. If you don't have any ideas, we can also move on. So right, for example, when you ask what the current world looks like, right? You can tell like, okay, for example, in the current world, there's the increasing use of AI or the popularization of there's also a popularization of AI, for example, right? But Another thing you can also say, for example, like when I was teaching them earlier, I was telling them, okay, for example, the current world has just recovered from the pandemic, right? And what was the implication of the pandemic on our education system is that were forced to immediately transition into virtual schooling, but this encourage and incentivize, encourage means incentivize, by the way. This basically just incentivized more investments, more research, and more development of virtual schooling systems. What does an example of this look like? It looks like Google Classroom and Zoom becoming more efficient. It looks like teachers and tuition teachers uploading a lot of their videos online. It looks like online courses becoming so much more common among tuition teachers, like Martin Teo, like Tan Yan Ju. I'm sure you guys know them because you guys are Form 4. In this case, you can see me that I ask myself, okay, what does the current world look like? And then I say, okay, one of the characterizations under of the status quo is that in the status quo, we are currently recovering from a pandemic that allowed us to put no that forced us to put more investments into the virtual schooling systems to make it more efficient, right? So what is the implication behind this? Is that we can gather from this that virtual schooling right now is well researched and efficient, right? And then later on you can use this in your arguments. Can you start to see what I mean by when I say that setup is important for, like, the base of your case? It's the foundation of your case. Because when I tell you virtual oh, this is more like for opposition sort of framing, right? When I tell you as an opposition that, oh, virtual schooling is virtual learning right now is very well invested into, then therefore I'm telling you that virtual learning is that therefore more efficient. Then later on in my arguments I can talk about why exactly this was uh it can just be used as an additional framework for why my arguments were true or why my arguments stand strong, right? Because it's because it's about, one, making sure your arguments later can stand strong, because your arguments have their own reasonings, but then later in your setup, this is just generally just supporting all of your arguments all in all most of the time. But then secondly, also, it's about making sure your opposition cannot rebut you, right? Because when you provide clarity and you make the debate sound objectively in your advantage, it makes it much harder for the opposition or your opponents to come in and then bring up some other stuff. So it becomes very hard for the opponents, the government, for example, to say why exactly virtual learning was going to be inefficient, right? Because you can say, oh, actually we put a lot of investment into virtual learning, for example. So that's an example of how the setup. I hope you guys can see how it's unfolding to be, like, proving the point that it is about providing a foundation for your case, right? So that's basically how I do it, right? And then afterwards, you can once you've proven like a certain point, then you can provide your examples as to what exactly this looks like. We call that grounding. So when we bring in grounding, that means that we are bringing in real world examples to make things sound more realistic. But we only use grounding or examples when we've already proven a point. So when I mentioned Tan Yan Ju, Martin Teo, Google Classroom, Zoom meeting, all of that is only mentioned to, like, really strengthen the point once I've already proven it, right? Okay, understand that? Or do I need to repeat it?
I understand it.
Alright, Christy?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, great. So, next thing we're going to talk about, what are the issues in the status quo? Or what are the issues in... Yeah, what are the issues in the status quo? In this sense, you're just basically asking yourself, what exactly are the problems that I can solve, right? But not only that, what exactly are the goals that I intend to solve, right? Because issues are not just problem, masalah. It can also be about, like, issue as in the kehendak, as in the... I don't think kehendak is the right word. My Malay is very bad. Like the apa itu? Goals. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Matlah. Uh, in the sense that, for example, in a certain debate, you might be asking, okay, what is the main issue in a debate where we talk about, like fossil fuels versus renewable energy, for example. Obviously, the primary issue is climate change, right? And climate change activism, for example. But then in the motion, like, this house regrets the popularization of virtual learning. In this sense, the one of the issues, for example, could also just be a problem of, like, for example, maybe certain people have for opposition lah, certain people might have anxiety, for example, or certain people might have difficulty learning in physical environments because of the fact of like maybe like some developmental disorders, right? So that's an example. Secondly, you can, as a proposition or government, for example, you can tell me the issues are about like making sure education adapts with time, right? Or like is able to fight any risks and threats to education, such as AI that is increasingly making people rely more on external sources rather than relying on critical thinking, for example, right? That's also another issue, for example, that you can bring up. uh, Another issue you can mention, if you don't want to make it about problems, if you don't want to make it about masala, you can say, okay, the goal or the primary issue in this debate is basically the quality of education, and that's what the entire bottom line of the debate is that it's about which side is able to prove you're able to provide better quality of education, for example. So that's basically the many ways you can characterize the status quo under both what are the issues in the status quo, and secondly, what does the status quo look like. Okay, got it? Any questions?
Yep.
Nope.
So basically, a status quo analysis.
Yeah, characterization. One of the ways the many ways that you can characterize. Part of it, like for example, the first thing usually that you will mention is, okay, what does the status quo look like? So you're analyzing the status quo. So yes, a status quo analysis is basically what we're talking about.
All right.
Okay, great. I'm assuming Christy has no problem since she didn't ask a question. So next thing we're going to talk about counterfactual. So I hope this is familiar with you guys because we mentioned it like on the first debate 101. Counterfactual basically just means the world. Oh, we from the same place. Where? The Bronx? The world. I hope you guys know that meme. Okay, so in this sense, it's just a fancy word. A lot of debaters also just say the world. But we also say the counterfactual because it just sounds better, and it also just drags more attention to like, oh, this is, we are talking about the counterfactual right now, instead of just like, oh, okay, the world. So yeah, you never talked about a counterfactual. No, actually we did. The world was the counterfactual, right? Sorry, I make that sound confusing. So when we talk about counterfactual, right, basically the idea here is that we're just painting a picture of what the world, painting a picture of what the world looks like either under government or opposition, right? So as a government, for example, you paint a picture of what the world that you're defending as government looks like, and then on the contrary, you paint a picture of opposition's counterfactual, right? So this is often going to be used. My mistake for this earlier, because earlier today, that I kind of just ran with the example because I was in too deep. Oh my god. Mechanization should only be used for actor motions most of the time, and sometimes mechanization is used for value judgment motions, but counterfactuals usually only really exist in value judgment motions. So this house believes that, this house supports, this house opposes. So for example, in a debate where like you say that this house believes that Sarawak would no, Ukraine should surrender to Russia. I've debated this before. It was semi-finals SSIDC 2023. I was joining with Batstin and Rachel, your super seniors. Technically, Rachel moved to Newton very soon after, but yeah. Um, so in this sense, government's counterfactual. We were arguing under government why Ukraine should surrender to Russia. This was at the height of the war when it just started being like reported. Um, what we what we kind of did is like when we paint out a picture of government's counterfactual, aka what the surrendering to Russia looks like, it looks like you put down all your weapons, for example. Of course, we already know what surrendering means, right? It means like a dictionary definition of like just letting Russia take over you. But we also said is, for example, letting Russia completely annex you, but still trying to make negotiations through it, right? So because of the fact that we can say that Russia does not, has its own interest to take over Ukraine, right? But it does not, but it also does not want to continue the war, right? But then Ukraine has the capability to just also have leverage here because of the fact that Russia, any country does not want to continue war. They only do war because certain like incentives to start the war is much higher than the incentives to not start a war, right? So in this sense, if you can if you can cater to all the interests of Russia, in the sense that you allow Russia to annex you, but then you still ask for a little bit of autonomy or a little bit of citizens' rights being protected, of Ukrainians' lives still being able to be lived out normally, or like as normal as you can get for like a post-war recovery state. In this sense, you can still gain some sort of leverage to be able to try to ask for like, okay, yes, we're going to get annexed by you, you're going to win, but please try to help us recover from this war. Like that, for example. That's an example of a counterfactual lah. Like a characterization is that you go through negotiations, you try to achieve a more desirable outcome for your own people as the Ukrainian state, right? Oh my god, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank god. I thought my speaker and microphone disconnected. Okay, so that's an example for government's counterfactual. Under the motion, this house believes that Ukraine should surrender to Russia, right? On the other hand, when you paint a picture of what the opposition's counterfactual looks like under that motion, we basically told the judge is that it looks like in a world where Ukraine has to continuously fight against Russia. But then also another thing under the counterfactual is that they have limited supplies, right? So this means that Ukraine has to constantly keep on fighting a war where the only assistance they can get is through NATO, for example. But insofar as like NATO only has its limits as to how much financial aid and military assistance it can provide, and that Russia is a much larger state compared to Ukraine, and it has the geopolitical advantage in that sense because Ukraine is smaller than Russia. The war will last for a very long time, right? Because of the fact that like Ukraine, Russia, even though Ukraine gets NATO supplies, that means that basically Ukraine on the battlefield is equivalent to Russia. But what happens when they're equivalent? They just keep on fighting for years on end. In fact, it's still going on. Pretty sure the war is still going on. I haven't really read up on it recently, but yes. So in that sense, we just told a judge that the opposition's counterfactual most likely is going to look like constant, everlasting fighting, right? Until at some point in the very long future, someone wins, right? And there's no guarantee that it's going to be Ukraine that wins, unless opposition can prove that NATO supplies were enough to be able to beat Russia, in the sense that not only do you manage to defend Ukraine, but you also manage to launch offensives on Russia to the point that they surrender to NATO and then stop invading Ukraine, right? So it's like that's why there's another like entire analysis on why that's unlikely, right? So, do you guys understand the counterfactual in that sense? Any questions?
Yes.
Christy?
Like when creating like a counterfactual, how much like can we assume the status quo, like the world changes after the motion or like policy is like introduced?
Mm, 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 mm. Oh wait, I was gonna be like, oh I'm so sorry, Khalil, but I forgot you already like buka puasa anyways. Okay. So okay. Alright. So that's actually a very good question. I really love that you asked that, Christy. Um, counterfactual. The thing about counterfactual is that you have to prove the likelihood of counterfactuals. So when you talk about counterfactuals, you have to tell the judge why what you are saying is the most likely outcome, right? So you give reasonings behind your counterfactual. Why exactly does it look like this, right? That's something about counterfactual that is very unique to value judgment motions. Later we'll talk about fiats. There's a special thing for actor motions and mechanisms that's called fiats that is completely different. Later we talk about that. But first we continue talking about
Wait,
characterization.
Fiat's the structure.
The
Is Fiat's
structure,
like a template
template for characterization ka.
for debate,
Do I have a
like
structure?
arguments.
Oh, yes. Actually, there's a lot of different structures. I can give you like several if you want. I have one structure document. Actually, I have an entire video on this. So both of you guys can watch it. I did it like, I think a year back. It's on my YouTube channel. Please don't watch my other videos unless you're not going to judge me for it. Uh, yeah. I'll send you later. Cause
All right.
I know Nathan was judging me damn hard. Okay. So, next, we talk about defining terms in the motion. This is where it becomes very general. There's not really any like exact like, oh, like this is the questions you ask yourself about what to say when you're defining terms of the motion. This is just about practice. This is literally just about practice, right? Defining terms in the motion just means providing context on how exactly a certain thing was going to play out, right? So hold on, yeah, give me a moment. I'm going to just take out my book and find a motion so that I can give example of how you define terms for that motion. Okay, where is it? Okay. This house would. Okay, this is a very generic motion. This house, as a parent, would raise their children according to the deferred happiness model. Oh, sorry, I missed the first part of the motion. In a relatively equal society, where the quote unquote protected sphere model is the norm, this house, as a parent, would raise their children according to the quote unquote deferred happiness model. And there's an info slide for this. I hope you guys know what an info slide is. Info slide just basically just means like it's just a slide of info. Like I it's just basically just like a paragraph of like information that supports the emotion, right? So for deferred happiness model, the emphasis for this is that it's an emphasis on successful adulthood. For example, you focus on academic and extracurricular achievement, right? Whereas for the protected sphere model, there's an emphasis on letting kids be kids, right? So for example, a focus on playtime and personal enjoyment. So it's basically just like let kids be kids or prepare kids for adulthood, right? So this house as a parent would raise their children according to the deferred happiness model. So tiger parent your children, for example, right? In this sense, um, the most obvious things that you need to define in the motion is what is the deferred happiness model. Yes, technically the info slide has already told you it's an emphasis on successful adulthood, but realize the fact that at the end of the day is a dictionary definition, because info slide is meant to provide you a dictionary definition. You're not meant to give a dictionary definition. What you tell me is the deferred happiness. I don't have any. Okay, let me just think, because I don't have anything written down on this. Deferred happiness model. You can tell me that, for example, under this characterization. Oh, it's the idea that, for example, one, you have to. It's a trade-off of having to allow constantly survey your kids, for example, make sure that they're studying and involving them in a lot of extracurriculars. But the point here is that it's built on the trade-off of being able to make sure that your kids are more successful in the future. And then a second thing you can say is that, okay, deferred happiness models, they're able to increase the likelihood, they're able to make your children much more prepared for adulthood, in the sense that one, they learn responsibility, for example. Two, they learn one, they learn responsibility because you're constantly forcing them, or yeah, forcing them as a parent to make sure that they're always keeping up with their responsibilities no matter what. Secondly, they become much more capable of handling stress because of the fact that your deferred happiness model is assumably probably going to cause some level of mild stress for kids, because of the fact they are have to study and a lot. They have to always finish their homework. They always have to be active in extracurriculars when they are not even busy with homework, for example. So basically, it's going to be a very busy life, for example. So what these two characterizations mean is that in the future, you're more like is that in the status quo, this is also status quo lah. Status quo at characterization. You can combine things, in your setup. In the status quo, we live in a world where basically the society only rewards the people who are the most capable of being able to provide productivity to, for example, a workplace or company, for example, because of the fact that we live in a capitalistic society that is inherently always going to give the maximum amount of benefit to the people who work the hardest. In other words, you work hard, you get the most amount of money lah. So In this sense, someone who has a deferred happiness childhood is going to receive all that things such as being able to handle stress and having a better sense of responsibility, which is going to be able to make them a more productive worker. Insofar as we are able to make them a more productive worker, we tell you the implication here is that we set them is that basically they are more likely able to they are more they are a more desirable candidate in employment, for example. Now I want you to notice when you define terms in emotion, don't go too far. Because at that point you should already kind of stop. When you start talking about it provides it you're a more desirable candidate for employment. That's already very closely to leaning on the line of what is considered argumentative. The thing about setup or characterization is that you do not want to be argumentative. This is very important because your argumentative stuff is meant to be obviously in your arguments. When you start talking about because they are able to the deferred happiness model is able to make them a better candidate. What does this mean then? Is that because they are a better candidate for employment, that means they're more likely to get financial stability. Thus, they're going to be more happy. No, at this point you're starting to prove to me why exactly was like the deferred happiness model better, right? Yes, in your setup you're supposed to try to paint the deferred happiness model in a great light, but you're not supposed to argue to me why it is explicitly better than the protected sphere model. You're just supposed to set up the debate only. The time for you to argue comes later, alright? This is a very important point because this is a mistake that a lot of debaters make, including me, because when I'm rusty and haven't debated a lot, I often end up going overboard and almost mentioning things that are a little bit too argumentative in my setup is very easy to do so, and especially easy for beginners to do so, that they include argumentative stuff in their setup. In fact, just now during our training, we did a practice and they ended up including argumentative stuff in their setup. So it's a very important point for me to emphasize to you guys, avoid argumentativeness in your setup. But you kind of understand how I went about that just now, right? Is that I told you what exactly does the deferred happiness model do to children, right? Is that what does it do? Alright? What does it do? It basically just like creates a higher sense of responsibility in children, and it also increases their ability to handle stress, for example. And then secondly, I tell them like I also give a characterization on the status quo. I tell you that in the status quo, what we live in a capitalistic the status quo is a capitalistic society. That means that we always reward the people who work the hardest, right? Insofar as you were able to provide productivity to a company, that company was more likely to have higher there was more likely that you were going to have they were going to have higher demand for people like you, so therefore they're likely going to pay more in order to have you, compared to losing you to other uh companies, and then they lose that competitive advantage that they might have been able to make, right? You understand how I define those terms, ka? Like how I characterize that motion. Understand, ka?
Yes.
Okay. If you have any questions, if you feel like a bit blur, I can try to simplify it. It's fine. Just mention it if you don't understand. Khalil, what about you?
I sort of understand.
Sort of understand. Okay. Any parts that you do not really understand that I mentioned earlier?
Right, to be honest, I actually kind of understand.
Huh?
Like, to be honest, I actually understand the whole thing.
Understand the whole thing. Okay, cool. Then we can move on then. In this sense, next we're going to be talking about actor or stakeholder analysis. Give me a moment. Okay, there's two key differences behind actors and stakeholders. Actors are people making an action in the motion, and usually the most of the time when we use the word actors, I'm not talking about Jennifer Lawrence or something. I'm talking about people who are like the primary focus of the motion. Uh, that's a bit bad way of explaining it. Sorry. Is the people primary person making action in the motion. So for example, the motion that we mentioned earlier, it says this house as a parent would raise their children, blah 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 blah. The actor here is the parent, because the motion literally says this house as a parent would. In any motion where they say this house as X, like X being anybody, the X will be the actor in the motion, right? But then in certain motions, they don't mention the actor. They just say this house would, blah 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 blah. In that sense, you either just have to use your own common sense, and yeah, you just have to use your own common sense. It's either gonna be like it's most of the time when they don't mention an actor, it's usually the government. But don't tell me like later they say this house would raise your children according to the deferred happiness model. Don't tell me just because they didn't mention parents, suddenly you're saying that it's the government raising them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying use your common sense. It's just that most of the time it is the government. Alright? Now, secondly, stakeholders on the other hand. Can you give does anybody here like let's just say Christy lah, do you have any idea of maybe what a stakeholder means?
Is it like people who are like affected by like the motion?
Great, yeah. How? Okay, that's good. You know your stuff. Okay, you both of you guys. Thank you. Okay, that's basically what a stakeholder is. It's someone who is affected by a certain like are the most affected people in the debate, right? That's the reason why it's called a stakeholder, as in they hold a stake, as in they hold a risk. They have a risk in the motion. They are at stake in the motion, right? Does that make sense? Okay, I'm just gonna assume it
Yes.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, in this sense, when we talk about stakeholder analysis or a actor analysis in our characterization, we usually do this when it's very important to analyze what exactly are the interests and incentives of the people in our counterfactual or the people in our debate, right? So let's look to the previous motion, right? The previous two motions that I mentioned. Firstly, on this house regrets the popularization of what is it called? Virtual learning, right? In this case, the main two actors, no, the main two stakeholders are obviously students and teachers. So you can tell me what exactly do students is the analysis behind students? What exactly is the analysis behind teachers? So you can tell me like teachers, they have an incentive to be able. The main incentive is to be able to educate the students to the highest capability probable, possible. So this means like being given the proper resources and proper platform to be able to educate the students and keep them in line. Second thing, stakeholder analysis of students. You can say that students want to have their entire stake at line here, so it's very important that you educate them to their fullest. But another stakeholder analysis that I can give you is that students are immature because of the fact that the vast majority of them are children. So therefore, if you as a student, you're most likely going to make immature and irrational decisions. You are very hard to control. That's why you need to be socialized. In the sense that when we say you need to be socialized, that means that not you need to start talking to people, but socialization is the action of basically just uh, introducing you to society. It's like a sociology term where when you socialize someone, you're just basically introducing them to the rules of society. So, for example, you socialize them to be more disciplined. That's what school does. You socialize students to respect authority figures, for example, so that they are more likely to respect their boss in the workplace, for example. That's an example of how school socializes students for their future in the workplace, for example, right? That's an example of student analysis. On the other motion we mentioned, this house as a parent with blah 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 blah. This is leads us on to our next point. Is the fact that actor analysis is often tied to mechanization or mechanisms. Now, before I move into what exactly a mechanism is, I want you to know two things. Firstly, in actor motions, uh, or there's basically like this house would, or this house as a parent, as a whatever would. Hold on. Your primary purpose in the entire debate is not to prove why it might be good for children, it might be good for teachers, it might be good for society. Nobody cares about society now. The only thing we care about is parents. You need to be debating in the most selfish way possible. You need to think about, as a parent, what is best for me, right? But this doesn't mean that you cannot talk about students or teachers or society or whatever, right? You can talk about how, not students, kids. You can talk about how your happiness of your kids is also going to affect the happiness of the parent because of the fact that parents care about the well-being of their children, and it hurts to see your children be sad and be burnt out and be stressed, for example, right? That's also an example of actor analysis, that you're analyzing the interests of the actors. Why do you need to do this? Very importantly, in this house, wood motions, is because of the fact that the entire debate is only about how can you benefit that specific actor. But this only applies to this house as X wood debates. If it's this house wood, then it can just be general. It can be how it benefits society, how it benefits the government. But if it says this house as a parent would, only talk about how it benefits the parent, and you can prove it through many different means, as to, for example, how it affects the children, thereby affecting the parents. As long as you tie it back to the motion about parents. Okay? Second point. Before I move into the second point, does that make sense to you guys? Is that the primary focus, the only thing you should be approving in a this house as X would motion is that you should be proving why it's good for X. Any questions, any confusions? Khalil, Christy? Hello, wait.
I don't think
Uh,
so.
Khalil, you can go first. Khalil, sorry.
I don't think so.
Okay, Christy?
not at the moment, no.
Okay, great. Second thing I need you to know before I go into mechanisms. You have fiats. Now, what does a fiat mean? Fiat, F-I-A-T. It's a bit, I don't think Google will give you a good definition because I remember being confused by what it meant when I first got taught it. Google is not going to give you a proper definition because fiat means something different in debate. Fiat basically is just a concept in meta debating. When we say meta debating, it's just the idea of debating the debate. We were talking about what are you allowed to say in a debate, what are you not allowed to say in a debate, right? Fiat is something special to this house wood motions or actor motions that the government side has the capability to argue anything they want about the mechanism, about how the law is going to look like. So, I want you guys to look at this motion, right? This house will ban the use of AI in primary and secondary school education. The government has the fiat to assume the they can say however fast the ban is going to be applied. They don't have to prove why it's going to be banned like super fast or super slow. How would this be banned? They can give any sort of regulations. They don't need to prove why the government will specifically choose those regulations. Why? Because they have the fiat to assume. If, on the other hand, this is linking back to Christie's question just now, counterfactual, you need to prove why this is most likely going to be the case. For most part. I think for like how fast this ban is going to be applied, not really. You don't really need to, because in a lot of this value judgment debates, there's actually certain cases where even though you don't have a very strong fiat, you still the judge will still accept you as long as you give a very normal counterfactual as to how exactly like, oh, this will be done slowly, right? And you can just say why. If you really want to prove why, because you're scared like the judge won't buy your counterfactual because you didn't prove the likelihood, it's very easy. It's just like one sentence now. Just like, okay, why is the ban of the use of AI going to be slow? It's because of the fact that the education system obviously does not want suddenly the children that already have grown to rely on AI to suddenly like become like suddenly have like a very extreme shock that like is not able to be controlled by teachers, for example, right? All you can say is suddenly very fast because the education system wants the most urgent, the most higher solvency as possible. They want to be able to solve the issue as fast as possible because it's a very urgent issue, because it affects future generations' ability to work and ability to contribute to society, right? It's up to you because characterization is subjective. It's about just basically just making the debate sound in your advantage. Okay, does that explain fiat to you? What exactly does fiat mean? And how it differentiates mechanism versus counterfactual. Christy, especially, because she was the one who asked the question.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Okay, great. Khalil?
You like I think I froze in the middle of your
Ooh. Okay, okay. So which part did you miss? Like, what was the last thing you heard me see here?
so I am really lost.
Okay, wait, where did you cut out on?
Like the whole thing.
Like, on starting on this slide or starting on this slide?
Oh, no, the next slide.
Next slide. Okay.
When you were about to explain on about fiat.
Oh, when I was about to explain on fiat. Okay, okay. I'll just re-explain fiat in this case. Fiat fiat is basically just the idea that the government side has the fiat. That's when we use the word. Government side has the fiat to assume a certain law is going to be passed the way they want it to be passed in parliament. So, when we use the example of this house will ban the use of AI in primary and secondary school education, the government has the fiat to assume that the ban is going to be immediate, or the ban is going to take place over the next 5 years by slow increase on regulations until it's completely banned, right? Completely prohibited. It goes from like, oh, it's just like we do not recommend you, and then it goes like, oh, we limit in these specific assignments. So like, oh, we like you are not allowed to use AI for any assignments except like assignments where we allow you to use AI, and then oh, we don't have any assignments where you can use AI anymore over the next 5 years, for example. Whichever one you say, it's up to you to whichever one you think is more strategic for your debate. You have the fiat to assume. You don't need to prove to the judge why is what you say most likely going to be the way the ban is going to be done, right? You don't need to prove that because you have the fiat to assume. That is what sets mechanism and counterfactual apart. In counterfactual, I explained earlier to Christie's question that you need to prove the likelihood of a counterfactual. That you need to prove why exactly this ban was going to be applied like immediately or like over the next 5 years. But honestly, for questions like these that are very simple, unless it's very complicated counterfactual like analysis that really really contentious and really really like controversial, only then you really need to prove the likelihood very heavily. Other than that, honestly, just give a one line on like why exactly is this going to be the case. Like why exactly, like if it wasn't this house will ban the use of AI blah 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 blah, it can be this house believes that the use of AI in primary and secondary school education should be banned. There's a difference all. It's a different motion all. Because in this case, government no longer has the fiat because it's no longer an actor motion. They only have fiat in this house would or actor motions lah. In this case, you need to prove to me why exactly this ban was going to be immediate. But you don't really need to prove it like very well. You just can say like, oh, it's gonna be immediate because of the fact that it's an urgent issue that the government wants to solve immediately. They don't want the future generation to be like affected very badly. Done. Because the judge doesn't really need like extreme elaboration on this unless your opposition team is going to come in and say some stuff against you, which likely they're not because it's going to overcomplicate the debate, and that's going to make the opposition team more likely to lose. Also makes your team more likely to lose, but technically it just makes everything much more muddier. No judge is going to like that. They're going to not like the opposition team that does that unless the opposition team provides you reasons as to why their counterfactual framing was better. Why their counterfactual analysis or counterfactual characterization was better than the counterfactual analysis that you gave in your prime minister's speech. But for fiat, opposition has to go with government. So you understand the difference between mechanism and counterfactual that is decided by the word fiat. You understand what the word fiat means basically? Khalil? Khalil. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, bagus. Now we can move into what a mechanism is. I think by now, because I've already explained I've already explained an example of mechanism, I think you guys already kind of know what a mechanism is, and you guys have probably read part of the slide. A mechanism is just a policy that as the motion says that the actor has to do. So what this means then is basically just what yeah, no, it's just basically what the actor is going to do. Like, there's not much I can say about this other than the fact that when you explain your mechanism, it's just you mechanize. That's what we say when we are explaining our mechanism, we call it mechanization. We are mechanizing, right? Or in other words, we are explaining how the policy was done. and this is only really used in discourse word motions, but there are cases where it can be used in discourse belief step motions. So for example, there was a debate I saw recently. Discourse believes that the World Bank should adopt the one country, one vote system. In this case, government had to do a bit of a mechanism as to why what the one country, one vote system looks like. But actually in that sense, it's more likely to just be called a counterfactual. So it's fine if they just mechanize it under their counterfactual and they don't call it a mechanism, they call it a counterfactual. But it's better that when you use this house belief that you use the word counterfactual, in this house would you use the word mechanism, right? So in motions, you use your common sense to figure out the primary actor, right? This has to ban the use of AI in primary and secondary school education. Who is the actor? MOE, the Ministry of Education. Obviously. Who else is banning? Nobody. It's only MOE has the power to do this, right? So then, in your mechanism or your mechanization, you tell me how fast is this ban going to be applied? We talked about this earlier. Or how will it be banned? Like how exactly are you making sure AI is banned? Like are you putting AI detection tools? Are you investing in them by the government, or are you just using the ones that already exist on the internet? Blah 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 blah. Right? Are there any minor exceptions? For example, something about this. When you create exceptions, it means soft lining. Soft lining basically just means running a soft stance in the sense that you are kind of just not fully banning the use of AI. We were talking about this the other day in the group chat, where when you're not fully banning the use of AI, it sounds very soft, kan? It's not like, oh, I'm banning the use. So then it's very soft lining. It becomes much harder for the judge to differentiate between you and government and opposition. So it's more likely to make opposition to sound better, and it's more likely that the judge is going to give the win to opposition because of the fact that government was not able to prove why banning the complete use of AI was good. And if you softline too much, you're not even just called softlining, you're literally squaring the motion in the sense that you're not even debating you're not even giving the case that you're supposed to give. You're not even defending the thing that you're supposed to defend, right? Because you went way too far from the motion. You went way too off topic. So try only to make minor exceptions if 100% necessary. If you can debate without these exceptions, do it. Don't make exceptions. Alright? Another example, this house will live like a rolling stone. I'm sorry my voice becomes very bad for the next few minutes because I've been shouting for the past the entire day. And I didn't have on, oh my god, and I was it was like a entire classroom, and I was using a very loud voice, and I didn't bring my water anyways, so. Fuck! Alright, this house will live like a rolling stone. In a sense, you know what, I'm too lazy, let's skip this. Okay. So, what's the point of actor analysis? It just helps the judge understand why your mechanism works the way it does. In the sense that when you tell me why the actor is likely to do a certain thing, or why the actor is likely to want to do this, then you tell me why exactly, then it's very easy to explain why the mechanism is going to be beneficial for the actor, because it fulfills the interest of the actor. Basically, in a debate, in a dishouseful debate, it's about how successful your mechanism is going to be. So do you guys understand? Before we move into the next part.
Inshallah.
Okay, great. Christy?
Actually, I have a question about stakeholders.
Yeah.
Do we what's it called, consider all stakeholders, or only those directly affected by the policy?
Only those directly affected by the policy, because remember what I said about clarity in the debate. Clarity is also about relevance. If you only mention something to clear up the debate, if something is not relevant to the debate, if a stakeholder is not relevant in the debate, then you don't need to mention the stakeholder, because it's just a waste of your time and you need time for your arguments. Which actually brings me to these tips. First, everything should have a purpose in your setup, which is also answering your question lah. What is the primary purpose? It's one, clarity, and two, just making the debate sound more in your favor, because of the fact that characterization makes everything sound objective. Because characterization is about providing a backstory to stuff, right? Providing context to stuff. But the fact is, everything in life
you can manipulate it to make it sound like it's good for you, right? You can say, oh, my exams are in 1 month. I can either look at this is like the half full versus half empty cup thing. You can either characterize your cup as half empty or half full in order to make it easier for you to argue later on, right? You can tell me like, oh, your exams are coming in 1 month. Oh, that means I don't have a lot of time. Or it means, oh, I don't have a lot of time. That means that it's going to pressure me to start manage my time better. So therefore, I'm going to increase my capabilities to study better and study more effectively. Or you can just say my grades are gonna suck ass. Many different ways. But no, I don't have enough time to study. That means that I'm not going to be able to do enough to be able to cover my entire syllabus by the time the exams comes, right? So that's the point of characterization. One, it's on clarity, clearing up things that are very vague in the debate, and secondly, making things sound that they are in your advantage. Second, do not go over 3 minutes. Do not go over 3 minutes for your setup ever. Maximum 3 minutes 30 seconds. This is also me talking to myself, because when I'm rusty and I haven't debated in a while, my setup always ends up being 4 minutes because I end up forgetting how to be strategic in my setup. So, and I've been here for like 4 years and a half. So like, not 4 years and a half lah, 4 years and like a few months. So, yeah, no, it's a big problem, especially for beginners. Actually, no, not for beginners, because beginners actually don't know what to say. Then once you're at the point where you kind of know what setup is, then you start doing too much of it, then after that you waste your time, right? Be concise. Only mention things that are relevant. If you do not think it's relevant, cancel it out. You shouldn't feel like once you write something down on your paper, that you feel like you need to mention it because you wasted your time writing it. You know what that's called? Sunken cost fallacy. The point is like, for example, you're a gambler in a casino. Then you gamble a bunch of your money away already. Then, now you say, oh, but I already gambled so much away already, I might as well gamble even more. No, that's stupid, right? You don't want to write something, and you already wasted kind of a bit of your time writing that certain point, because it's not relevant. You don't tell me now, or you say, oh, I already written it, I might as well mention. No, that's stupid, because then it's just going to take up your time, take away time from things that are more important. Instead, you should just start writing more on the other things that are more important, do with what you can, accept the fact that you wasted time, or you improvise lah if you don't have any more time. Delete stuff that you think might not be relevant, that is not relevant to the motion or to the debate. If you do not think it's relevant, just delete it, or don't even write it in the first place if you know it's not relevant. So always keep that in mind when writing setup. Thirdly, then, work from if you do not know what to write for setup, because in a lot of cases, certain debaters are like, wait, I really low-key have no idea what I'm supposed to write for my setup. In this case, your setup is supposed to be a preface for your arguments. But when you write your arguments, slowly you're going to realize something like, oh, wait, I need to mention this for my argument to work. Oh, that thing that I was supposed to mention? Okay, I write it in my setup now. So in this case, you can actually work on your arguments first, then move into your setup. But if you can think of your setup first, if you immediately comes to mind already, then go for it. I also sometimes write my setup first, and then only write my arguments. Sometimes I just write my arguments and my setup at the same time. Like, I'm very indecisive, and I just write one sentence, and then go to the argument, write one sentence, then go to the setup, write one sentence like that. I'm indecisive in that way lah. But then it's up to you. But if you cannot come up with setup, work from the arguments. Lastly, then, always be open to moving certain parts of your speech from your setup to arguments, or vice versa. So what this means is that when you accidentally write something that's too argumentative in your setup, that does not mean that you need to scratch it away and never mention it again. If you find that it's actually a good point, just move it into your arguments. Find a good place where you can move it into your arguments, or kind of integrate it into your arguments in a different way, and then boom, you just make your case significantly better. The same thing applies to argument. If something is very framing the debate rather than framing your argument, just move it to your setup so that it's more strategic that way, that it's more well structured in the way, rather than having a very short setup and a very long argument that's a lot of it is just prefacing, right? Okay, 4 tips done. Do you guys understand fully? Any questions at this point? Christy?
Yeah, I understand. I have no questions.
Alright, Khalil?
I froze right as you asked like questions.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I didn't say anything after that.
Wait, I don't think I have a question then.
Okay, great. Do you guys have a curfew,
Nope.
Christy?
No.
Be honest with me. Okay, now be honest with me. Are you guys tired? If you guys are tired, we can end now. I do not want this to be an ineffective session. But if you guys aren't tired, you have the semangat to continue. We can just continue with this exercise, this practice. But not really a practice. This is more just showing you what a setup looks like. Christy, are you fine?
Yeah, sure, it's fine.
Okay, clear?
Yep.
Alright, great. So, Machine Gun Kelly, the context. Um, I used to have this. I don't know if this is a debate joke or if it's just a Lutong joke. I have no idea where it came from. It's the same way that I found out Tiga R is not something that only exists in debate. Because I actually learned Tiga R, like, don't mention royalty, don't mention, like, religion, don't mention race. I thought this meant just, oh, don't mention this in government-sponsored debate competitions. No. I only realized, like, in Form 3, I think, that Tiga R meant, oh, don't mention these things because they're issue sensitive or something in Malaysia. Yeah. Uh, Machine Gun Kelly is a joke about like Andrea Ong. She's your super senior. Technically, she moved to Newton.
Oh yeah, I
You
know
know
her.
her? Oh, that's great.
Yeah, she's like my ex best friend's older sister,
Who's your ex best friend? Wait.
Ivan Ong.
Ivan Ong pula! Ivan Ong pula! Eh! Yeah!
What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him?
Nothing wrong with him. Bang, I went to KL with him lah because Andrea Ong. Okay, sorry, I go off topic ah. Andrea Ong. Okay, I was like not friends with her. She was more my senior because okay, I met her when I was in primary 4. She was primary 6. We went to KL for this competition called ITEX in KL at KL KL Convention Center or something like that. KLCC, is that called KLCC? I don't know. Basically we went to KL lah for a competition, like a STEM competition. We basically just half out the entire script that our teacher gave us, and then after that we're like presenting a loofah. It was like a loofah project. It was like a basket made out of loofah. And then, like, because, like, Andrea wanted to go, she also just, at that time, because they had fucking 12 lah, they brought their parents. I was the only one who parents didn't come. But actually, I was so excited about it because I was like a 10-year-old, like, I get to travel without my parents. I also cried on the first time because I was 10 lah. But yeah, Andrea went with, Andrea went with her parents because it was just easier. But because her parents went with her, they also kind of just went there for like a bit of like a travel and vacation lah. Ivan Ong also just came along lah. So yeah, that's how I know Ivan Ong, because like he was just like tagging along in the competition the entire time, just running around with us, even though technically he wasn't part of the team. He's a cool guy. You're friends with Ivan ah?
Like ex best friends. Like I used to be very close with him until Form 3, early Form 3, because he moved to K Newton.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
I'm still close. I'm still like good friends with him, but we just barely talk due
Fair.
to different schools.
Yeah, I see that. Alright, that's a cool connection. Actually, everybody has too many connections to Andrea. I also have another friend who is like Cheryl Chew, my friend from Meichong, has an older brother who is very close friends with Andrea called Jordan because they were in the same class in Zhonghua. There's too many connections. It's crazy. So yeah, Andrea Ong, she was in our debate club last time. Like she was in Lutong from Form 1 to Form 3. She was one of the people who trained me during her Form 3 years. I mean technically it was Hairi and Adrian mainly, and also Ethan Tan. You don't know him, he's in Canada. He's Tyra's cousin actually.
Oh, yeah, I know him. I know him.
You know him? Oh yeah, cool.
Best friends with his cousin. Right now,
Like Tyra ka?
Tyra's older brother.
Oh, Nevexus. Okay, I see.
Yes.
Yeah. Nevexus' cousin lah. So, and Andrea was just training us lah. And then basically, whenever she debates lah, this girl is damn cool because of the fact that like, she didn't, okay, Team Malaysia, there's three things to Team Malaysia. Actually, two things, and then one of the things are split into two. There's Challenger Squad and Development Squad. Development Squad is basically just people that they want to train that they think have potential to join Challenger Squad. Challenger Squad is made out of two teams, Team A and Team B. Team B is just kind of like the alternative team that has like reserve members for your Team A and also just represents Malaysia on a lot of like other international competitions. Team A is the team that represents Malaysia in the largest secondary school debating competition of all time, WSDC, World Schools Debating Championship. That's where we get the format World Schools from. It's because it comes from the WSDC competition. So don't say you've joined WSDC before. You haven't. You've just joined WSDC formatted competitions. If you've joined, if in the future when you join these competitions. Andrea didn't even join Development Squad. And almost every single person joins Development Squad before they join Challenger Squad. No, she just straightforward just went to Team B. And then next year she's in Team... I think the next year she's already in Team... Wait, no. Next year after that, then she'll enter Team A. And then she's still in Team A because she's just damn good. She's like a really, really great debater. And she provided very great training. Another thing about her, because debaters have a lot of shit to say, she speaks very fast lah. So our main nickname for her in the club was Machine Gun Kelly because of the fact that every time she talks she's like a fucking machine gun lah. Okay, joke explained. Just her 5 minute break. Huh?
You don't know where she went, right?
Newton.
You don't know where she went, right?
Italy, yeah.
Where she is right now. Yeah, I attended her leaving party. She went. I'm pretty sure she got a scholarship in Italy or somewhere,
Yeah, it's
like
the
Naples or something.
United World Schools. United World Colleges. Actually, like there were 5 members in Team Malaysia, Team A of Team Malaysia kan. 4 out of those 5 are currently in the United World Colleges, so they really like national team debaters. Which, fair, they are very good. They are like the smartest usually. They usually get scholarships to international colleges. Like a lot of them enter like London School of Economics for some reason. It's a very common school for them. Yeah. No, if you enter the national team, it's a very good future for you. But it's also very hard to enter, and it's very, very grueling. Okay, let's go back to the topic. I'm so sorry for going on a sudden rant. I hope you guys enjoyed that. So, we won't be debating this, but we'll just be listening to this. We'll just dengar lah saja. This motion, this house refers parenting models that identify teenagers to those which emphasize their status and treatment as teenagers. You can read through this. Give me some time to rest. My throat hurts. Wait, how do I'm just gonna search it up. Oh yeah, okay. I know you can't see my other tab first. I'm gonna just pull it up before I Oh. This is WSDC 2022. Usually you can find a lot of recordings for WSDC online. This is Hong Kong versus Singapore. And it's on YouTube. I think it's a very easy and simple setup example from the Prime Minister. So that's why I'm using her as an example for this practice lah, like just seeing what setup looks like. Okay, can you guys see the screen? It's loading, I know, but can you guys see the loading thing?
Of parents on both sides of the house. Then we say parents have inclinations.
Okay. Can you guys hear that? Oh, you
No.
guys, no, you guys can't hear it. Okay. Why am I still presenting that? Hold on. Okay. Can you guys hear this? She's not loading. Hold on, give me a moment. Give her a moment. Give us a moment. I don't know. Bang, kenapa lagi? Sorry, I have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 16, 6, 7, sorry. 16, no, 17 tabs open right now because I'm like researching stuff for the World Bank and like.
Freedom on our side. They will likely have more financial autonomy, like a monthly allowance, instead of asking their.
Can you hear that? Oh my god, why is she lagging so much? Well, I'm.
Otherwise, through the chat, and I go by she, her pronouns. And also, I'm just going to make a disclaimer.
You guys can hear that, kan? Christy, hello? Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, this is gonna start now, huh? So you guys already got the motion in your head, right? It's.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. She's basically supporting, what is it, adultifying teenagers, just to remind you. Okay, we're gonna start now.
In case my parents watch this one day in the future, none of what I'm saying is me. Okay. When children mature and change to become teenagers, parents cannot be static. Otherwise, this is a recipe for conflict and perpetual friction. It is of utmost importance that parents adapt to ensure they allow their teenagers to continue to thrive while still protecting them from the worst of outcomes. 3 arguments Hong Kong will forward. Firstly, how we better family relationships. Secondly, how we better prepare teenagers for the future. Lastly, how we better protect teenagers from the worst of harm. Before that, setup. 1. What does the status quo look like currently in terms of parenting models? We say there's currently a mix of both sides parenting model, although our side is gaining more prominence right now. But we have traditionally been more accustomed to viewing teenagers as teens. You view them to be more irrational, that as a parent, you know what's better for them than they do themselves. Second, what does our parenting model look like on our side? We say adultification looks like a general guidance framework. This obviously adapts differently to different families through trial and error, but generally here are the main outlines. 1, we would give teenagers more freedom on our side. They will likely have more financial autonomy, like a monthly allowance, instead of asking their parents for money on every purchase or having their parents decide whether or not you can buy something. You also probably will be allowed to leave the house more. You have later or laxer curfews. We would also probably assign them more responsibility. This can look like, for example, encouraging your teenagers to gain a summer or part-time job, or on a smaller scale. You may have more responsibilities at home, such as feeding or cleaning your baby sister, cooking your own food, and like chores along those lines. Thirdly, then, what is the comparative and their model in Singapore side? We say parents are likely to be stricter with teenagers, such as making a 10 p.m. curfew a hard rule, not allowing them to drink or they face punishment otherwise. We'll concede that you probably also will give them less responsibilities. The bottom line is, 2 models are not only different on what is and isn't allowed, but how parents and children communicate and how they choose to do these things. I.e., on issues like sex, on opposition side, parents likely think these teenagers are too young to do this and therefore ban them from having it with their boyfriend in totality. On our side, parents are less likely to be actively against sex, but they're likely still going to prepare you properly. I.e., they're more likely to teach you how to use a condom right, teach you consent. What are the incentives of parents on both sides of the house then? We say parents have inclinations to protect their child because most parents want the best for them. Every piece of media and every natural instinct you have as a parent is to be protected. When we hear phrases of parents saying rather than letting themselves be the one, they would rather let themselves be the one hurt instead of their children. They overweigh risk with constant unfounded fear for their children's safety and the image of them as just a kid being built into their heads to not think they can make good decisions. This implies on both sides, parents probably won't just throw their hands up entirely and not care about their children. But also, we say physically or significantly emotionally abusive or neglectful parents are probably not in this debate as well, given the type of parent that would do this are likely symmetric. If you don't put too much attention on your teen's development, you probably don't realize which model you're doing, you don't really care anyways. First argument, how do we better...
No, okay. This is why I mentioned the machine gun Kelly joke. She is speaking very fast for you guys, I'm assuming, kan?
Yes.
Well,
She reminds me of Lisan.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I can see that. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Debaters have a lot of things to get across, so they speak very fast. Actually, Team Malaysia is known for the opposite because we have a very strict emphasis. Like, my Maxine runs a strict game. She's the team manager. Actually, I don't know if she's still the team manager for Team Malaysia, but she used to be, I think. She might still be, I'm not quite sure. She runs a strict game. Manner must be on top. Strategy, you must know the exact winning pathway for every single motion and debate. Matter, you must have very great structure and arguments and setup and everything. So Team Malaysia speakers are actually slower. It's fine if you're not this fast. You don't need to make yourself fast. Did you guys catch what she was saying though, even though she was fast?
Kind of like half of it.
Okay. I don't want to make you guys re-listen to that again unless you guys want to. If you guys want to, you can just tell me right now. Okay, I thought so. Don't worry, because I wrote down the entire summary of it. Okay? So, let's go back to the tab. You should be able to see this, right? Can?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So, yeah, she's too fast. I noted it down for you guys because I know it's a bit too fast for you guys. Plus, honestly, when you're listening to a debate, don't feel scared to like press like back, like back 10 seconds to like re-listen to what they said. Everybody does that. Only a few like pro debaters are trying to train themselves to track better. Don't do that. Everybody does that. Don't worry if you do it. Just do it. Okay. So, what did she actually say? First, status quo. On both status quo on what do I mean by this? Hold on. I wrote this thing 2 weeks ago. I'm sorry if I'm a bit rusty on not rusty, like hazy on what exactly I meant when I wrote this. Parenting. Okay, I think okay. When I wrote this, I basically was saying that the status quo that she describes exists on both sides. It's just that, okay. The status quo looks like both adultification and emphasizing and also treating teenagers as teenagers, right? In the current world, basically, there's a balance of both, right? But she's telling us that adultification is becoming more and more prominent. The second characterization that she gives of the status quo is that most people see teens as irrational and immature, right? So these are the two things she characterized under status quo. You can just see she characterized status quo lah. That's the same way that I said, oh, you need to characterize your status quo. What is happening in our current world? What is happening in our status quo? Is that both types of parenting exist. And then and then also it's the idea that people see teens as irrational and immature, right? And immature. Second thing that she characterized, or second point that she characterized, adultification. In this case, you're basically this is about defining. Hold on, defining. Where is it? Defining terms in the motion, providing context on how it will play out. This is that adultification. She's basically just defining the term adultification because it's a very vague term. Like, what is adultification? So she tells us it's one, more freedom of choice and more financial autonomy. So you have more. This is very like obvious as to what it means. And then secondly, more responsibility. And then because this is like, okay, what exactly do these responsibilities look like? She gives us examples, right? Part-time jobs, carrying your own weight in the house, having chores being done well. So she gives two elaborations as to characterize what adultification looks like. Thirdly, my throat is genuinely so painful, it's burning. What is the comparative, right? One is that parents are what is the comparative? When we say what is the comparative, it means what is the, well, how do I say this? My English is limited to debate jargon. what is the comparative? What is the alternative lah? What is the alternative? So basically, since she's government, when she says what is the comparative, she's referring to what is the opposition's counterfactual. What is the opposition counterfactual then? It is treating teenagers as teenagers. But what does this imply when we treat teenagers as teenagers? One, she tells us it means stricter parenting. And then she gives us examples. Having curfews on children or having prohibitions on what exactly you're allowed and not allowed to do, right? So like, are you allowed to like have like drink? Are you allowed to have sex or some stuff like that? Prohibitions. Now, secondly, she also says that in this sense, opposition has to no government concedes that teens on opposition side will have less responsibilities because their parents do not expect them to do part-time jobs. They do not expect them to do a shit ton of chores in their house because they expect their children just to do the bare minimum of like keep up with their studies, make sure they obey the curfews, make sure they obey the prohibitions because of the fact that they are a teenager. This is what they should be doing as a teenager, and at least that's what opposition thinks lah. So that is the comparative of the characterization of the comparative on opposition. Now, she also gives us a bottom line of the debate. She tells us the main bottom line isn't just about adultification versus treatment of teenagers as teenagers. It's about how parents and students communicate. And then she gives us a analogy, not analogy, like an example, right? She says on opposition, what this treatment of teenagers looks like under the bottom line is that they ban sexual intercourse with their children. Whereas on government, they concede that they give the freedom of choice on what the children want to do with their lives to their children. Of course, I don't think a parent wants to know that their child is having sex lah. But then they give the freedom of choice to their child. So they provide sexual education to their children in order to prepare them, right? So it doesn't mean she's basically just trying to make her setup sound more rational in the sense that she's telling you that adultification doesn't mean neglecting your kid, like treating them like an adult that can do their own things. Because of the fact that they're still a child, still a teenager, of course you're still going to educate them when necessary. You're still going to fulfill responsibility as an adult, as a parent. It's just that when you do adultification, the only thing that changes is not how is the only thing you change is not how exactly you like how exactly you see your child. No, you still see them as your child, your teenage child. It's just how exactly you parent them, right? So you're still going to be parenting them in the sense that you give them the freedom of choice to have sex, but you provide sexual education, like teach them how to use a condom, for example, or like teach them like protection, or teach them like the harms of STDs, for examples, and stuff like that, right? So it means like that's basically what identification looks like lah. Providing them the education that they need in order to be equipped with the knowledge that they need to be able to make freedom of choice, right? So you notice how this makes it sound much more better for her side, right? When she mentions this, because it sounds like, oh, opposition, you ban sexual intercourse, but then children have a way of getting, not children, sorry, teenagers have a way of getting around this, right? Like I already mentioned like the kingsport incident just now earlier, like. Hello, we live in Malaysia. I don't think anybody is doing the adultification method unless you're like a rich Chinese auntie who wants like her children to be independent, and you live in KL, specifically, like, what is it called? Mon Kiara? Maybe lah in that case. But I'm willing to bet the parents of those, like that boy and that girl who had sex in Kingsport, probably banned their children from having sex. But they still went about it anyways. She doesn't even need to mention this, the speaker, the prime minister, because it already makes her case sound so better. And she's going to make those arguments later on in her. She's going to make those argumentative claims in her arguments later on. So I hope you understand that. Lastly, then, she talks about stakeholder analysis. Of course, the primary stakeholder here is parents. There's also children, but then I think she talked about that in her arguments mainly. But because parents haven't really been talked about, right? All of this was just about giving children more freedom of choice, or like controlling children more. This is all about children. So it's a good point here that she wants to bring in parents because parents haven't been talked about enough, right? So she does stakeholder analysis on parents because they are still a stakeholder, because parents are also going to be affected in this motion. So she says that parents, as an actor in the sense, not just necessarily as a stakeholder, care about their child, right? Because they are the one who's parenting their child. They're the one who's making the action of parenting their child. But then the incentive as a stakeholder and also actor is that we want to protect them. So we have to prove why the children are going to be better protected under government compared to better protected under opposition, right? Because the incentive of the parent is to want to protect them. So insofar as we were able to prove that we were able to fulfill the incentives of the parents, we were able to win on the idea that, oh, our side is better for parents. And then we can later on you just prove why you're better for children, no? But then yeah, she also links this that says the incentive of wanting to protect their children means that they want the best for their children, right? So this means that all of these parenting techniques are just about making sure you prepare your children the best for their world, right? As a parent, because you love your child. The exception, and this is lovely framing that I always copy paste into every setup, irrational parents are an exception that will not care on either side. The thing is, in a lot of debates, for a beginner, they might just say that, oh, you have neglectful parents that use adultification as an excuse to neglect their children. But then the same parents that are irrational parents, basically, that neglect their children when they do adultification, these irrational parents still exist under opposition side. But now they are not doing adultification. Now they are treating their teenagers like teenagers. What does this mean? Maybe these irrational parents that are kind of stupid, instead of doing adultification and neglecting their children, well, not adultification, instead of neglecting their children, the way they quote unquote treat their teenagers as teenagers is by abusing them now, like hyper control over them. So it's the fact that you need to mention that irrationality exists on both sides of the debate. It doesn't matter if opposition tries to bring up that, oh, they are irrational, because these irrational people exist on either side of the debate. That's a very good point of framing that everybody should know, because it's a very easy thing to use against beginners, because it's something that they always bring up. Okay, so do you guys understand, like, basically what she said now that I've explained it?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Great. I feel like my throat is bleeding. This is the okay, last two slides. This one we're not doing. We are not doing this. Yeah, okay. Moral lesson of the day, except for Khalil, cause you're PI. Okay, what can we take away from Team
Wait,
Hong?
wait, what's moral?
Huh?
What's the difference? I'll still learn moral, like moral values from it.
Boleh juga. Sure. Moral lesson of the day. What can we take away from Team Hong Kong's Prime Minister setup? So, she characterized the status quo. We already mentioned status quo earlier before. She said teens are seen as irrational and immature, right? She also defined the term. She told us what adultification means. It means letting teens be more autonomous in their decisions, whereas treatment as a teen means strict rules and punishment if they don't obey, right? So she really clarifies what exactly what these terms mean, and not only that, she also tells us what exactly the status quo looks like, right? Why does she have to mention this? It's because later on, it's going to be relevant in her arguments when she talks about, for example, wait, what was it? Hold on, let me think. Oh yeah, when she talks about, for example, that teenagers need to be able to learn to be able to make the decisions, right? They need to be able to, like, learn a sense of responsibility one way or another, or else this immaturity is not going to be escaped, because the only way you can mature is by making mistakes and learning, right? And learning lessons, right? Moral lesson of the day. Yeah. So that's why she mentions the status quo lah. At first it might not seem so relevant. Not relevant. It might not seem so, like, clear as to why she mentions it, but then as a judge, you'll already be able to see, like, okay, yeah, this is the status quo characterization, and then later on when she mentions the argument, it's already so clear, like, okay, yeah, this is why she mentioned her status quo characterization, no? So it sets up your arguments later on, right? Okay, other than that, we can also see that she does stakeholder analysis on parents. I already explained a bit on this just now, about why she explains on parents, because she didn't talk about parents beforehand. So she says that parents have an incentive to take care and protect their children. This is a very common characterization for parents in a lot of debates regarding parents. She also tells you that the irrelevant stakeholder is neglectful parents or irrational parents, right? I already explained this too.
Lastly, she also made a counterfactual comparison, right? And the good thing about her setup, is that she boils it down to a bottom line, right? Is that she doesn't just tell you what adultification is, and she doesn't just define what treatment as a teen is, like over here, right? The aura of that guy. Okay. She also tells us what the bottom line of it looks like. So she tells us like a specific scenario. How would parents differ in parenting their kids, right? So she tells us adultification. It means expecting teens to make their own choices regarding sex, life. But as a parent, will educate because you love your children. But then treatment as a teen means parent regulates their teen behavior because you don't want your kid to be gatal, you don't want your kid to have sex life lah. We already explained this too. It's good to boil things down to a bottom line, or if you don't want to, you can just do it in here. Like, what is the comparative adultification versus comparative? You can just immediately just start comparing right now. Actually, you know, yeah, she already does it anyways. That's basically what she does. Yeah. That's another example of characterization lah. Just comparing two things, telling us what the two different things that are in the debate look like, side by side. So do you guys understand this completely?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We're gonna end. But before I end, um, this is also directed to those who didn't join, and also to Khalil and Christy. This is up to you, because I'm already grateful that you guys were able to join so late on a sudden whim, and for listening to me talk for I think about 1 hour and 40 minutes now, probably, or 1 hour 30 minutes now, because I really want to make sure I go in depth into setup for you guys, since you guys are kind of being rushed. Um, yeah. Any questions? Like big questions, like from any of the slides. Questions outside of setup pun boleh. Like not regarding today's lecture. I'll give you guys
I
like
yeah,
wait.
I think I have one.
Okay, wait. Can you give me
Like
a moment?
about your
Sorry.
or
Because I want to get water. And then after that I'll come back and respond to you.
it's
Is it
alright. I fast the whole day with water, right? You don't you can get used to it so
Thanks for the encouragement. But it is still night time, so I'm still gonna get water. Okay. You guys
alright.
you guys think of any questions first, and then after that I'll answer them. Bitch, aku tired lah. Aku penat lah, sial. I got BM in the morning doing the penyuntingan practice. Then I got ab mass. Then after that got okay, BI was a rest start. BI was fine. Eh, yeah. And then after that I fucking chemistry test afterwards. And then after that I go back home. And after that I fucking pack my bag. I shower. I do my hair routine because I'm Indian. I want to have good hair, so I buy products from Little India in Kuala Lumpur and bring them back to Miri. I love Ayurvedic coconut hair oil. And after that I fucking go to school again. Train them for 30 minutes, 2 hours. I'm sweaty by the end of it. I get back home at like 4:40, and then after that I shower as fast as possible. And after that, actually no, I don't shower fast as possible. I shower super slow. And after that 5 o'clock, my tuition starts. And after that I do until 7. And after that I fucking settle the LIDC stuff earlier. And now I fucking do this. I'm fine though. I'm fine. But I know I'm actually
You
fine.
know, you can cut like 10 minutes from your whole routine if you didn't have hair.
You Yeah, that's the thing. I don't really have a lot of hair, but I want to have good hair. Like, I'm so ugly when I have short hair. Like, I have pictures from me when I was in the US last year, like during my exchange program.
I look so much better because like my hair, one, there was no humidity in Iowa. The fuck, there's no humidity during winter. But secondly, it's just like I could grow out my hair super long. God, I look hot. And I don't look hot anymore. Look like a fucking nerd. I mean, I always look like a fucking nerd lah, but at least I look like a hot nerd lah, with long hair. Okay. Let's start with Khalil. Do you have any questions?
I had a question, but I forgot it.
Okay, that's fine. You can remember it first. Christy, any questions?
Wait, I'm still thinking of one.
Okay,
Yeah,
go.
wait. So my question is that you said that during the characterization part,
Yeah.
we have to basically define. We have to like clarify further on some sentences or some of our arguments that might have ambiguous meanings, right?
Yes.
So like, for example, if the motion is the House believes that parents should be liable for their children if they commit crime. In our characterization, we have to explain like, okay, the children mentioned exclude like mental in children's with mental illnesses. Do we have to explain like that?
Hmm. Yes, you can explain like that because that is a characterization of what does it mean to be what exactly is considered liable, what exactly are parents liable for, because that is a characterization. However, I do want to mention for this specific example, I do think when you say that, it's a bit of a soft line because of the fact that parents like parents being liable for their children's actions should also apply when, like, when you as a parent, you have an obligation to take care of your children, no matter if they have mental disorders or not. You as a parent, when you decide to have a child, you are basically uh risking the fact that your child might have Down syndrome, might have ADHD, might have autism, might have any of these um what is it called, like they're not like
Mental disorders,
mental disorder. I feel like there's a better name for like autism, and I know, okay, Down syndrome is definitely a mental disorder because that's quite
mental
literally actually
disabilities.
yeah, disabilities, mental disabilities, right? In this sense, you are already ob- no matter what, you're obligated to make sure your kids are like you are obligated to make sure your kids are raised well, and are also make sure that your kids, as their parent, you are able to kawakan mereka as much as possible, to the extent that it's like you stop them from creating harm to others lah, because you were the one who decided to have that child that's going to be immature and irrational and like stupid during their first few years in life, right? So even when they are someone with a mental disability, you still have an obligation to help them because of the fact that they're still your child, and there's still an ability to control them. It's just that you need to put in more effort. Just because you weren't expecting to have a child with mental disability doesn't mean you only have to put the amount of effort you will put in for like a, I guess, a normal kid lah. Because when you become a parent, what you're like consenting to is basically just saying, I consent to having to take care of a kid that's going to be super hard to take care of. I'm ready as a parent to do that. Only then should I be a parent, right? Because this house believes that parents should be liable for their children's actions. It's not only a practical motion, but it's also a principle motion. We can talk about this another day. I don't think it's very important for SSIDC because you guys, SSIDC is not like needing you to do principles. Principles only really for WSDC and like more advanced competitions and BP competitions that are more advanced. AP, nah, because AP is more like basic. But principles are basically just like like they're not about like the practical outcome or something, but rather just like the principle lah, like just the morality or something. So it's not like based on the outcome of how it happens, but what exactly is the morality regarding something. So in this sense, the principle is just that parents always have an obligation to take care of their kids to any extent that is to the highest extent possible, because of the fact that they consented into having this obligation towards their kids as soon as they decided to have a kid. The example of an exclusion that you could actually make in this characterization is, for example, parents that not parents like women, for example, who were like raped, for example, and then they will had children that they weren't able to take care of, or parents that women and parents that maybe send their children off for adoption. These are, of course lah, that one different one lah. But then in these cases, because they never consented into doing this, you maybe in this case you could argue lah. That's when the exclusion occurs.
Oh, alright, alright.
Okay, just wanted to give my opinion on that too, because I was like just wanted to clarify on that. Okay, Christy, do you have your question?
I have a question on like framing or like weighing. Can you use like weighing to show that like even if the opponent's argument like does happen, it doesn't like matter as much as ours?
Even if the opponent's arguments happen, it doesn't matter as much as ours.
Yeah, you can. I think so.
Using weighing or framing.
Weighing.
Oh yeah, that is weighing. That is weighing. That is like, it's not just. I'm not just saying like, oh yeah, you can do that under weighing. That is weighing. Weighing is just basically just like, I mean, it's a multitude of things. Weighing is just weighing two things lah. Like weighing the importance of one thing against another. I have a slides on this. I think I can do another lecture on that. It'll probably be shorter because it's much more. Actually, no, it's probably gonna be like 1 hour. I talk a lot. Um, Weighing is about comparing the importance of two things, right? So when you say like, okay, when something happens, like opposition, even if something happens under their side, why are we still better than them? That is weighing lah, because you're weighing the importance of your points over their points, right? So yeah, that's weighing lah.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay, any more questions from both of you guys?
Nope.
Nope. Khaled?
No.
Okay. This next part, uh, because you guys have been here for like 2 hours, I will say, um, it's optional. I make this optional for you guys specifically, because you guys, I mentioned like tomorrow afternoon we also have another session kan. Yeah, since you guys have another session tomorrow afternoon, I don't want to give you guys too much homework. But if you do have the time, please do try to do it, because I think since we are trying to rush like as much progress as you two for as much as possible. Oh God, I just realized I'm recording this. I have to explain myself to the others. Um, yeah, since we're trying to like rush progress for you guys specifically for SSIDC, we are going to maybe if you guys can lah, maybe try to do the homework. But I want like, I understand if you guys can't, because you guys are from 4 and you guys are like Saturday, like you guys are going to be busy with me on tomorrow anyways. So yeah.
Yeah, what time is it? What time is it tomorrow?
Can we do, actually there's no specific time right now. Can we do maybe like, bila kamu buka puasa?
6:40.
6:40. What time you end ah?
Huh?
What time you stop? Like you finish buka puasa? Like no, sorry, you finish like your dinner.
Finish eating.
Yeah, you finish
7.
7.
Yeah.
Okay. Because tomorrow you guys also technically have the workshop to join at 9 p.m. from Adrian. That will only last from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. Do you think you guys can tahan another 1 hour of me talking to you guys from 10 to 11 after that workshop?
Well, we volunteered to, like, we already said yes to being grinded on.
Okay,
by
I
my.
just want to make sure you guys are consenting continuously. You guys can take away this consent whenever you want. Christy?
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it.
Okay, great, great, great. I swear, I hope this will, I hope like the current suffering will pay off for you guys in the future. Cause then you guys can like once you maybe like this 2 years, Form 4, Form 5 is not a great time to like become active in debating. But you already get a great foundation now. I swear. Then later in your university debating, you're gonna be goated. Then you'll be goated, and after that you like fuck up the entire debating circuit or something. So yeah. Okay. Um, I did this was mainly just for the juniors because I wanted this to be as relatable as possible, so that it was easy for them to do this. I made a motion of my own. This is very narcissistic because it's literally based on me. I hope that does not ruin your perception of me. Actually, if it does, it's fine lah because I kind of deserve it with like what I'm doing right now. Okay, okay. Vellan is a Form 3 student who's doing pretty well in in life in his opinion. His grades are decent. He's the most active he's been and will ever be in debating. And he also has a good social circle. One day, oh, actually I should add on to this. The most active he's been in debating, as in he is currently in the. Actually, no, I don't even need to mention that. Okay, and also has a good social circle. One day, Balaam finds out he's been accepted to the No program that he applied for, which is an exchange program to the United States. However, he will have to miss the first half of his Form 4 year to join the program. That is January to June. Understand the info slide, ka?
This whole like paragraph will be perfect for your biography.
Thank you. Christy, fucking you.
Yeah.
Okay, great. This will just be homework for you guys to be able to do whenever you want. You guys can turn this in tomorrow when we do like our next lecture on like more advanced framing. Now we're gonna next tomorrow we're gonna be talking about framing because we already mentioned framing was like complicated earlier, kan? Tomorrow we're doing
Yes.
framing. You can give me to this on either Saturday or Sunday. I don't think I have time to review it next week because from 5 lah, I need to study lah. Okay, motion. Eh? Mana motion? Okay. This house as Balin would join the No program. Not 15 minutes. You have 2 days to write. Not just a basics. Try to write a more advanced setup. I don't mind if you say it out loud, if it reaches 4 minutes, I don't mind because I really just want to see how well you guys can write matter on this. Next time we see how concise you can write for when we're actually in a round. But for now, I want you to write it can be 2 to 4 minutes worth of content. Preferably 3 minutes lah, because that's the sweet spot. Actually, 2 minutes and a half is more like the sweet spot, but 3 minutes just because I want to see a bit more content lah. You don't need to record it, just need to write it in a Google document. Preferably, I would like to see you writing it in script form because I want you guys to start practicing being able to write things as efficiently as possible. Because when you write, not script form, sorry, bullet form. Because I do not want you guys, when you write in manuscript form, it's like writing like everything like down word for word grammatically with with grammar and punctuation. That's wasting a lot of your time. You only have 30 seconds to prepare, and not only that, once you move on from Asian parliamentary to British parliamentary is 15 minutes only. So you really need to start practicing when you start with Asian parliamentary to be able to write fast. Not only that, whichever one of you guys gets elected to SSIDC, there will be ranking, which means you out of 3 motions we have to choose 1 motion and veto, which means like veto means you guys know what veto means, right?
Yes.
Yeah, basically just like you don't want that motion at all, so it won't be chosen in any way whatsoever. There's no possibility. Ranking takes about maybe 3 minutes if you're efficient. Most of us as Lutong people are damn fucking from at least maybe I think I'm very damn fucking like urgent and like panicky when I do my ranking, so we do it as fast as possible. But that does not mean the other team will do it fast, so it might take up to 5 minutes. At 5 minutes, the runner, which is the person who manages your ranking and also leads you to your room, is going to start bugging the other team like, "Okay, bagi sudah lebih." My Malay is so bad. It's already been 5 minutes. At that point,
5 minutes is the maximum lah. But then imagine it takes 5 minutes. Then some more you after you get that 5 minutes ranking, only then you start running. I'm telling you, Swinburne that fucking place if the elevators are full, you have to go up 7 flights of stairs. If you go up fucking 7 flights of stairs, it's going to take 5 minutes. So by the time you reach the place, you only have 20 minutes to ride. And not only that, you're right. If your opposition you're writing on the floor, so you need a clipboard with you. So you're going to be writing with terrible posture. All of these factors means you have 20 seconds to write on the floor a case with pen and paper. You don't have a lot of time. You need to be concise. So train yourselves to write fast. But for this one, I want you guys to write quality over time for now. Later, we as soon as possible, we start focusing on time. For now, we focus on quality, but write in bullet form, if possible. Write in any structure that you want, so long as it's not script form, so long as it doesn't look like an essay. Okay, any questions regarding this motion and info slide? Ada? Oh, government, by the way. Not right now.
So you basically just have to defend your decision.
I guess so. Actually, do you guys want opposition? I would like that, actually. See you guys don't defend it. Not defend, sorry. Wrong thing. Characterize. I underline the things that I want you guys to characterize the most. I also did not characterize another thing. Wait, say that. How? Okay,
Oh,
hold on.
is one of the arguments Balin would have good hair in US?
Yeah, it is. Okay, so for this one, I prefer you guys, not prefer, I do not want you guys to do arguments because of the fact that currently we're doing setup. I want you guys to just see how good your setup is, and also and if you guys write arguments, it's gonna take more time for you guys lah. Hold on. So the things that I underline and italicize are basically, I'll also send the screenshot in the chat later, are basically the things that I feel like personally would be the best things to include in your characterization. It does not mean that you need to characterize these points. It does not mean that you need to make individual points on these. It does not mean that you need to include every single point, every single phrase in your characterization. It's just suggestions. It's just a guideline to give you tips on how to do your setup. And after that, you can submit it to me on WhatsApp, and after that I'll try to give feedback. If I don't, remind me to give you, because I'm very forgetful, especially with Ting Jun Yu. I constantly forget to give him feedbacks. Okay, got it? Any questions before I just send this in the group chat, and after that you guys can do this over the next 2 days, and then we can just end it off now.
Nope.
Nope. Christy?
Yeah, no questions.
Okay. I think we do opposition now, because might as well. Don't write arguments because I want to see you guys not be argumentative. I want to see you guys the capability to be doing setup. Okay. Thank you guys for joining. Sorry that it took 2 hours. And I'm very grateful
Alright.
that you guys were able to do this. Right. Bye bye.
We basically volunteered ourselves to be grinded anyways. It's alright.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay here for a while probably because I don't want to sleep yet. But if you guys want to go now, it's fine. You can leave. Good night.
Alright, bye. Good night.
Bye.